91A notice. Per RSA 91A:2, paragraph 3B, I've declared the COVID-19 outbreak an emergency. I've waived the requirements that a quorum be physically present at the meeting pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order 2020-04, Section 8, as extended by Executive Order 2021-04 and Emergency Order Number 12, Section 3. Members will be participating remotely and will identify location and any person present with them at that locations. All votes will be by roll call. So I'll just go around and we'll take attendance here. Joy, do you want to start, please?
I'm Joy Noel. I am speaking from my home in Newberry. I am Newberry Selectman.
Okay, Terry.
Terry Murphy, calling from home, Bridgewater Selectman.
All right, Phil.
Phil Warren, Town Manager in Meredith, and I am in my office.
This is Mark Dakota. I'm in my office in Waterville Valley, and I'm alone. So, hi Jane. Glad you can join us. Glad to have everybody here. Let's start with the minutes of our last joint meeting. You received them beforehand. Anybody have any problems with the minutes as we've presented them?
No.
I'd entertain a motion.
Motion to accept as sent.
Okay. You want to second that, Terry?
I wasn't at the meeting.
Oh, okay. All right. Yep. Good.
I was away on vacation.
I'll second them for you, Phil, because you took the minutes.
Perfect.
Joy, all in favor? Joy? Okay. Phil, you okay with them?
Yes.
All right. And I am as well. And Terry, will put you down as abstaining because you weren't at the meeting. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Very good. All right. So that's out of the way. Let's talk about communications. Jim, you want to go over the letter? You're muted.
Yep. Here we go. Can you hear me? Great.
Yes.
Well, good morning, everybody. And yes, so you should have in front of you a draft letter that we put together, which I mentioned earlier. We worked with some of the narrative that you'd previously drafted as you were rolling this out to your individual communities. That we then kind of repackaged with a couple of other concepts. And we're proposing to do this for a couple of different reasons. One, I think, as you know, we've talked about, how we say it's kind of a coming out opportunity to, more publicly announce the coalition, what it stands for, what its objectives are. And so we thought this would be a good way to do so to the legislators as they discuss the budget, the Senate, and my colleague Kathy is on here as well today. As the Senate discusses the budget, it's continuing to work it up in committee right now. And so we thought it would be timely while that was underway. And also the folks on the other side of this debate, as you may have seen, I believe I circulated, if not, I will do so shortly, sent their own letter last week, encouraging basically legislators to consider the commission recommendations on school funding, that education funding has to be reformulated. And so with that in mind as well, we think it's timely, even though I think we feel pretty good that where the legislators are right now, this is the commission recommendation is something they're not going to take up and include in the budget, but nonetheless, we think it's a good opportunity to get our message out there, to let them know that we're engaged in this debate, and to share with the governor's office, as well as the Senate president and House Speaker and the various legislative members, to get that out there and work forward from it. So.
Yeah, thoughts on the wording or on the approach, Jane?
Yeah, you referenced the 36 donor communities, and really we're, I think, 26 that are a part of this CC2. I think historically there were 36, but the towns that are listed, I think were the original. But I think if you look at the approved budget, you'll see the 26 CC2 towns, and I think we have one alternate. And I can just email you that correction.
If you don't mind, and I think what I did there is actually the original towns, Jane, I think are listed on the Portsmouth website, and I may have pulled it from there as a historical, not with the current. So
Right,
yeah,
yeah,
and
that's an
that-
old website. Yeah.
that's fine. No, that's fine. So I will make that correction to 26 and then update the list of the towns for whom the joint board signs, but thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's going to get a little confusing because aren't there 60 or more that could potentially be donor communities?
72.
72, yeah. So I don't know how we want to exactly word that. I guess just sticking with the coalition community number at this point is the important way to do it, right?
Well, I don't know, if they're gonna be impacted, we're not asking, all we're saying is these are the potential people who would be impacted, not necessarily the towns that would be impacted, not necessarily that they advocated one way or the other. They will be impacted, that's the truth.
Yeah,
You know, a thought I have to that point, Mark and Terry, as I sit here and read the letter, so I'm going down for a second. I guess the fourth paragraph begins with utilizing the model created.
yeah,
One point becomes plainly apparent. Implementing such a formula would reintroduce and describe the concept of donor towns. We could probably craft a sentence after that would reference, basically say potentially creating as many as 72 donor towns under this model. So we're not speaking for them, but we're referencing the fact that it could create the distinction.
yeah. I think that's important to have that number because I think the larger that number, the more attention people are going to pay to it.
Okay.
So Claire, making it very clear that the coalition communities is communities, and then that it could impact 72 is important.
So let me craft a sentence right there. I think that's the best spot, and I'll recirculate that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
I had another comment. I can send you the memorandum of understanding that everybody signed. One of the things that we wanted to do for that was to complement the commission's effort as far as the analysis was concerned, but really, as you've done here, comment that they really didn't budget. They really didn't do the financial piece of it. And there's some language on the first page of the MOU that might be a little more, they did an awful lot of work. So we were trying to not totally bash them when we
Yeah.
created the document because they obviously, did that. So there's some language that might be helpful. And the other comment that I would say, and there's also some language of this in the beginning of the MOU, is it's really the excess swept. Now that's a no-brainer to all of us, but it's and there's some language that kind of explains that simply, and I think that's important because I know you're addressing it to the governor and the House and Senate, the Speaker and the President of the Senate. But if other folks read it, it's a tough concept,
Yeah, and just to be clear, I do anticipate sending this. My recommendation, at least for consideration, would be that this go to all legislators. That we shouldn't just simply limit it to the three leaders. That I think this is something that we should broadly submit so people are aware of the fact that we're out there and this is what our perspective is. So there should be a CC there, but if there's not, there will be. But yeah, I just, so we're clear on the potential audience, I do think it should be sent around broadly.
then if that's the case, I think the fact of the excess swept is an important distinction because everybody pays swept.
Yeah,
And
okay,
the only other comment that we really struggled with, Jim, and it's a tough one, when we were drafting all this before we hired you folks, is the tone. The us versus them message, or is it you need to find another financing mechanism for school funding?
Yeah, let me just add on to that, Jane. I think that's a great point. And if you look at the 7th paragraph at the bottom of the first page that starts with clearly there are many concerns, that's really the bottom line message. And
Yeah.
maybe we want to say that a little earlier in the document, because I think that goes to Jane's point about the tone. And I think trying to get across the point that we're not anti-education in any way.
Right.
A lot of members have voiced that concern.
Mhm.
We not come across that way, that we want to support education. It's just that the SWEP is not the correct funding mechanism. And
Agreed.
Going back to what Jane had said, we do want to acknowledge that the commission, did a lot of work on determining what the problem was. But apparently they ran out of time when it came to a solution because this is revisiting a payment structure that has failed already. And we don't need to go backwards and become more divisive. We need to pull all the people together because all of our children deserve the best education possible.
that's right.
I
Okay.
don't know if this would fit, but am I there? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Every time you're down in Concord, you always hear, that they're all in favor of local control. Doesn't this somewhat undermine that?
Mm. Well,
And so
for
for
the
the legislators who turn around and are going to stand up in front of whatever the constituent group is, even if you think you're going to receive money, sooner or later it will dwindle away. And your local control has been given back to a central government similar to Britain. So, I mean, you can throw even not necessarily in a letter, but these are things that have to sneak through because ultimately what many of the legislators are concerned about is getting reelected. I hate to be so crass about it, but that's in the back of their mind. They don't want to irritate too many people. I don't know how that would fit, but there's someplace down the road that we certainly have to think about. The fact is that they're, trying to educate the entire state isn't really what we should be doing. It's educating those people who are the legislators who are supposed to represent this. And again, that's still in north of Concord, it's still a very conservative state.
Yep.
And there was one other point that that Jim, you didn't participate in because we had kind of flushed this out before your involvement.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we were concerned about is that the school funding folks and the presentation is that it's not going to raise. We don't need any more money, but it's obviously a redistribution. So they were trying to get the same tax rate for everybody in the state, which ideally sounds, wonderful. But for those of the towns that are the CC2 towns, it's a substantial increase it would be a substantial increase in the tax rate. And you've referenced that, but I think that it comes from the recommendation, which really, conceptually makes sense, to make it even across the board, but it's the practical application. And we thought that was getting lost in translation. We thought the message was so strong that we don't need to raise any more money. We thought that the fact that these towns' tax rates would increase was kind of lost in the sauce. And that was all before your involvement, but it was something we were very surprised about when we went to presentations and we heard things. So I just throw that out there because I think the messaging is very strong. That is we don't need to raise anymore. We raise plenty, but it's the analysis of it that's really tricky.
Well,
Yeah.
and I think it's too complicated maybe for this letter, but I think when we're talking about it with folks, to point out that it's right now, it's only 72 towns, but that could grow, that could change depending on total valuation in the state, depending on how much money is needed for education. And all of these factors that people aren't thinking about. This is not a static list that it's only going to affect 72 communities in perpetuity. It's going to be variable, and a town may be a receiver community now, but they could end up being a donor community in the future. And because you don't have that local control, like Terry said, and it's calculated by the state, it's hard to know even year to year.
So I certainly think the tax increase argument carries sway. It's an important one.
Yeah.
I do like including that in here, and I say that because, you know, especially from a Republican perspective, but even Democrats have adopted this over the years. You know, one of the reasons we've not seen a sales or income tax in New Hampshire is the understanding, I think, really deeply felt understanding that even if you put in people have a 1% sales tax to fund this like small corner of government, once it's there, it's going to expand. It's going to set in roots and it's going to grow. You're never going to get rid of it. And so I think having that kind of come through in this communication will resonate with the leaders who just kind of have a philosophical opposition to creating a government program that can't be sustained, or a revenue source that could grow out of control in years to come. So, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of difficult concepts to try to get across in a page and a half.
Yeah, and I appreciate what you said. I think, Mark, what you said about, I think for this communication, we don't want to go to a secondary or tertiary level of depth here. I think we want, and the points that I think have been raised here are all good ones that I can tweak this and update it. But I think this is one where the first one is just like kind of top level. Let's think about like at 5,000 feet, what this is all about. And then as we get into policy discussions with people, we can drill down as necessary. But I think what we've talked about here is all relevant for this letter and can be updated accordingly without too much issue.
So the process from here, what are we going to do with this? We're going to tweak it and get another copy out to the joint board for review.
I defer to you, but so I'll update this. I'll try and turn around a redraft to the joint board today. And then I think once the five of you, with Jane and Paul's input, sign off on this, then I think the joint board, it could be shared with them to make sure they're comfortable with it. And then once we have that in hand, I'd like to put this on some kind of letterhead. So I don't know, I don't know if we've got a logo lined up, but if not, I can generate something and I can put that together, I think, fairly easily. And then once we have that, I will transmit it electronically to the governor, the Senate president, the speaker, and the individual legislators. I also would probably recommend CCing Commissioner Edelblue at Department of Education. And then, and once we do that, we can discuss whether or not we'd like to share it with the media, at least targeted. So John DeStaso at WMUR once a week on Thursday does a column where he kind of does short stories on political happenings of either coming up and he's the one that reported on the other letter, I believe, last week. And so since he's already written on it, it may be appropriate, and I might suggest that we simply share this with him and say, John, I know you've shown interest in this story. I just want you to know this went out to the legislature on Wednesday for your writing, and he could write a small piece on that on Thursday.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Okay. So then the first step is for me to synthesize these comments, update the letter, and get it to this group. And I'll do it sometime today. You'll have it.
All right, and everybody's okay with, when we've signed off on it, distributing it as here's what we plan to send out to all of the members, right? But not necessarily asking for a concurrence, just notifying them so they have it before it goes out. And then we can get it sent to the distribution list.
Yeah,
Yep.
they delegated this to us, so we
Right.
are just providing it to them for their information.
Yeah,
And so it can be posted on their website too, if they want to.
right. Yep. Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
All right, good.
Okay.
The only thing I would caution is that this is a public meeting and the edits, if you reply all, you might be running afoul of right to know. So I don't know if you just want to set a quick meeting tomorrow morning of this. No, we'd have to post it 24 hours.
Yeah, but
Just if everyone does it individually, like replies individually then to the edits.
replies to Jim individually, yes.
Okay.
Let's do it this way. So if you have any further comments on the letter, when Jim sends the revision out, please reply just to him. And if there, for whatever reason, there are a lot of comments, then we'll call another meeting and talk about it again if we have to. Good point. Thank you, Jim.
Thanks.
All right.
I don't know, I
Okay.
know that Paul just joined and I didn't know if he had any comments on the draft letter.
Yeah, we're just finishing up that discussion. Paul, did you have anything that jumped out? We corrected some numbers and other comments that Jim's going to make some edits. But was there anything that jumped out at you in particular in the letter?
This was the letter to public officials,
Yes.
right? No, nothing really jumped out at me. I thought it was, concise and well constructed.
Okay. Good.
Okay. Well, great. Then I will, I'll recirculate a revised final draft today, and I'll look forward to your individual comments. And if it seems like there's a lot of additional commentary, then I'll let everybody know, obviously. Otherwise, I'll send a final version around once that's all set.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Next on the agenda is the dreaded budget. As I said, I had a town meeting this week, so Judy and I have not spoken yet. So we will have to continue that. I apologize for not getting that done for this meeting, but the biggest thing with the budget, Jim, and I think that can go into other business, is the website.
Yep.
You had provided us with some information. Even without the budget report, I would like to still talk about that in the sense that we need to, did everybody get that information?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, so I do think that we need to talk about that, and at least from a conceptual standpoint, make sure that we're in agreement with at least the approach. We can decide to do, to wait if we want to get a budget report before we make a final decision. But I do think it's important, if we're going to get this letter out, to have a mechanism to have an online presence for the coalition relatively quickly after we get this letter out, because I think more communications is going to start happening once we put this out. So, Jim, do you want to review that with us?
Sure. So where we had left it a short time back was I would reach out to a web developer that I know and solicit numbers about to build a simple website to serve the kind of the functionality we had talked about. Not with a lot of pages and functionality that you'd see like in a really fully fledged commercial website, but really a landing page where we can post communications and minutes and things of that nature, and to be a resource for the organization as well as anyone else that wants to see what we're doing. And so I received numbers back, and so there are two numbers you see. The first is a one-time fee. It'd be $1,671, and that would be to build and operationalize the website. So that would be the whatever labor it takes to build that site. That would be the one-time fee. So we would then have the vehicle, if you will. The second number is $414 a month, and that's a catch-all to this person would also then would manage the website, would update the website. I believe the domain registrations are contained in there as part of that. There are monthly hosting fees associated with it. So the all-in number, that $414 a month, I think roughly comes out to about $5,000 a year, in addition to the one-time fee of $1,600. So to be clear, I have not haggled with him over this. And I've not gone to find a second, potentially competitive bid. The way we would structure this would and I believe our engagement letter indicated this, whoever we ultimately use would be a sub-vendor of ours at the law firm. But obviously, I want to make sure that we're in alignment on the cost. I think these are reasonable numbers for what we're trying to do. I do believe I probably have some flexibility to go back to him on the monthly management fee, and I'd be happy to. I think the build out fee is appropriate for what we're looking for, but that would give us the functionality, the website built out, and the functionality going forward to keep it current, to manage it, and to run it properly, so we have an online presence.
So thoughts?
Let me ask you a question about the website. When you say as a social presence, would a Facebook, and I have no idea how it works, that I refuse to join those things. Would a Facebook presence be more practical in terms of being able to have somebody that would manage that website who's knowledgeable about this thing here, rather than, or in addition to, it could be the both? Because basically, while we're putting a nice website out and we have plenty of things out there, in most cases what's happening is people are gossiping behind the scenes. And it might be better for us to turn around and be able to influence the discussion, especially at the legislative level. And I don't know how to quite go along with that, but I think it's a matter to turn around and get your point of view across. The websites tends to be somewhat static and would have some links to it, but whether or not people who think they're going to get money in a town and lower the tax rate to become more comfortable, is that going to, if that's their impression, you have to be able to counter that.
So it's a fair point, Terry. And so what I would say in response is the two different things. I certainly, and I think we talked about this early on, social media presence, and in this case, a Facebook page and probably a Twitter feed, right? Those are the two I think probably would be the most salient social media opportunities to drive message going forward. They serve a different function than the website. I think we envisioned the website early on as a, perhaps kind of an online headquarters for members of the coalition to access and to see information, to have that be kind of the public facing vehicle. Separate and apart from that, a Facebook site, a page would be appropriate at the right time. I certainly would support that and can help implement that. Used for a different purpose. You might cross post on there. So for example, if we had a Facebook page, I would envision taking this final letter, putting it on the website, but also placing it on the Facebook page. And so, we haven't priced out what that would take yet. Typically, it's not much. Once it's up and running, it's fairly sustaining. And, but I would recommend doing both, I guess is my point, not one or the other. I do think they serve different purposes, but they certainly, I agree, are helpful. And a lot of the legislators are on Facebook. And so it's another way to interface with them.
Jim, is this company capable of doing the social media side of it as well as the website?
You certainly could if we asked him to, yes.
Okay.
That's what I was going to infer, and I thought the rates quoted were more than reasonable, and instead of necessarily haggling, as Jim put it, on the monthly fee, if he included a Facebook, Twitter complement to it, then I think it's a good deal, because you're usually using Facebook and Twitter to drive people to your website. That's where you put your big documents, stuff that social media people don't have the span of attention to deal with. So you put little teasers out on those social media items, and if people are interested enough, then you drive them to the website to the full document. So if that were part of the whole mix or package, I think that's within budget and a desirable effect or outcome.
Yeah, and also I don't think this, although we can do it right away, like you say, Paul, I don't think that the social media side is as important until the legislature is in session or until there's specific bills that we want to address. So, I mean, we can do it right now, but I don't, while we're in the summertime lull here, I don't think that they're as critical. There isn't as much work to be done on them. And
And
that's
certainly the hierarchy of effort should be the website
yeah,
up and running, foolproof, then move on to Facebook, then to Twitter.
Yeah.
And spreading that out in the workload.
Yep. And like I say, I think that's something that we can do. And that's certainly, from a content standpoint, that's something that I can do. I do that regularly, helping to develop the content and sketch this out. A little bit of an art form to developing 280 character messages on Twitter. I think Terry said he's avoided being on Facebook, and I say good for you. So that's not a bad thing, but
that's not a bad thing.
no. But in any event, so if I'm taking your meaning here, let me go back to the vendor and speak with him about what it would take to layer in as part of this concept, building a Facebook page and helping to maintain that as part of this, and whether we can work that in with the existing budget.
Let me make it clear. I'm not against Facebook for turning around and basically spreading propaganda. But as far as being there, doing it back and forth, it's a full-time job. And if you ignore it, it's even worse. So if you put it together and you're gonna have a Facebook presence, we can go from there. So.
Yeah, and just to be clear, it's a great tool. It's a great messaging tool, and I can say from experience, a lot of legislators are on there, and as are your constituents. So not a bad place for us to be. I think that was something we had always envisioned at the right time. I think, Mark, you're right. As we scale this, I think the website's first, but that utility can be built out over the summer, and with perhaps the idea of launching it as we hit fall and bills are being filed once again, and we're kind of getting back in cycle.
I was going to add also, Jim, in terms of what you're talking with this vendor, in terms of scope of work, one of the things I would advise the group would be that, particularly the social media elements, that you restrict the ability to post or comment, on individual posts. You don't want to create an open forum in a public venue, since we're a public group. Most municipal Facebook pages don't allow comment because it just devolves into whatever.
Nasty.
Yeah. So in terms of maintaining that Facebook page, if we eliminate the comment section of it, then there's much less effort to maintain it too. So
I agree, and I will tell you, Paul, and I'm sure you noticed this, but several years ago now, the union leader disabled public comments on their articles, which they used to have, and ended up being the same 15 people arguing over the same things, and it just lost its utility. So, yep, okay.
So as I understand, we are going to develop the website that's the public face first. It will be taken care of. Then we will layer in Facebook and Twitter, and those would be more like back to school time, when everybody is starting to focus on education in schools, because if you're playing athletics, they go back earlier and everything. So August, because then everybody's going to start to be thinking about, where are my kids going to school? What am I going to have to pay for it? So I think we need to be up and running at back to school time.
Yep, we can do that. I agree.
All right, so we will revisit it at the next meeting then?
Okay.
Right? Okay,
Very good.
very good. Other business, I just had a question about SB 95. I noticed on the tracking page of the general court that is it still in the House committee? It's still noted as being in the House committee?
Kathy?
Yes, good morning, everyone. So House Judiciary met last week and they acted on Senate Bill 95. An amendment was adopted, the bill was adopted as amended 12-9. What the amendment does, interestingly, it removes sections 1 and 2 and only keeps the section of establishing a study committee. Representative Michael Sylvia from Belmont proposed the amendment. He has strong feelings about remote meetings. He doesn't particularly care for them. And he convinced, of course, the majority on his committee to adopt his amendment. That will go before the full House when they meet on June 3rd and 4th. The prime sponsor of Senate Bill 95, Senator Daniels, is aware of what happened. So we're in the what I refer to as the silly season. We shall see what the Senate does. Senator Daniels may find a House bill to include that, his language, or he may look at the budget. We shall see. But that's where that bill as itself stands right now. And we'll keep a pulse to see if that language pops up somewhere else.
So when it came out of the Senate, Kathy, it had a lot of support, right?
Correct. It came out of the Senate 24-0.
Yeah, okay. So they're probably not going to be happy that it was basically.
Oh, no, I totally agree. We're seeing that in many other bills. If the Senate kills a certain House bill, tomorrow morning, as a matter of fact, House Judiciary is having a hearing on a non-germane amendment.
Yeah.
Basically, the Senate killed the House bill and now is coming up on a different bill, and it's the silly season. So
it's driving NHMA crazy because all these non-germane amendments that, you're talking something, and it puts the original bill in flux as well, right?
And no, most certainly. I mean, it's funny this time of year where there's fewer bills to monitor, but this is what's happening now with all these. I can't think of another time I've seen so many hearings on non-germane amendments.
Right. Yeah,
It's just so there's more of a juggling act to follow.
absolutely. I've not seen these non-germane. Usually no meant no, and you came back the next year, but now no one's satisfied with no, so they're tacking on all this stuff. So
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so we're still up in the air and we're still working on the emergency orders then, and we'll see how it, now, if it does pass as amended, and the Senate goes along with that and they do the study committee, are we going to stay under these emergency orders, or what do you think will be the practical aspect? Are we going to have to start to get together for these meetings?
Let me take a stab, and I'll have to double check. I wouldn't want to say at some point, you have to look at it again. These executive orders are going to expire. And that's what I got to double check. I don't want to misquote on a date if it's, they're going to expire. So, and then to your question then, if we don't have language adopted that was in Senate Bill 95, as adopted by the Senate, then, and I think that's the intent of Representative Silvio with his amendment. He wants communities and boards to, get meeting in person.
Right. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right,
And
Well,
it's the oddity that it's not an all or nothing, one or the other. It's just having the flexibility to hybrid if you want.
Right.
well, really, you can hybrid now as long as a majority of the board is together. So it's really just a slight expansion of that ability that we already have in state law, right? Of just not having the majority together to hybrid.
You just had to have a quorum present.
That's right.
And it has to have an emergency. And if the emergency declarations are gone,
Right,
your pretext for it is also gone.
that's right. So we would have to have a quorum together, but we could still have members that came in remotely.
But I think the statute says they have to have a justifiable reason for not being present. And it has to be declared at the meeting. That's how archaic the current law is.
Yeah.
I mean, I get, no one really loves these remote meetings. If you're in a small community and you just drive down the street to meet, and the preferable thing is to do it in person. But, in our group, I'll state the town of Newington supported it and sent a letter in support of it as a result of our discussion last. But in terms of statewide organizations like this just becomes a logistical knot.
Well, and we have a lot more capability than we had even a year ago, so that these meetings are a lot more effective than they would have been in 2019.
No doubt.
So, okay, well, we'll continue to track it. Any other bills that, obviously the budget that we talked about, but anything else that we should keep our eye on?
Yeah, just two quick things, if I may, referring to the budget. And Jane, I know that's your favorite subject, but House Education is meeting on Thursday, and they're going to be acting on Senate Bill 135, which the calculation of the cost of the adequate education. Senator Hennessy plans on also incorporating that language into the budget, House Bill 2, the trailer bill, I suspect, and also House Bill 1. So that's something that has yet to be officially, Senate Finance, that's pretty much what we're really monitoring right now, because that's where all these little things get incorporated. So she's looking at incorporating the language of Senate Bill 135 into the budget. Why, maybe, and we'll know more if the House Education decides to retain Senate Bill 135, not sure, but and it could also be a placeholder and just in case. The House is a whole different animal, so I think she strongly wants to get that moving forward in that sense there, so.
Go ahead, Jane.
Thank you for tracking that. So the question that I have is that one expands what you have to pay for, frankly. It expands, includes things in education, it kind of tracks the Conville case. So that would have a budgetary impact, but I don't think that has been calculated. Is there a fiscal note, or is there any sort of financial analysis on SB 135? Because I don't think I lost track of that along the way.
Yeah, actually, there is a fiscal note, Jane, but basically, at the time this was drafted, the LBA was, before I scroll, the Department of Education did provide the changes, current total education grant under current law is say 922 million. Under this proposed Senate Bill 135 be 968 million. That was now that again, the bill was not amended. So this was the fiscal note when it was drafted back in December, January. And it was voted out of the Senate ought to pass without any changes. That again, could change. And again, we don't have anything just yet if she's placing into House Bill 1 and 2. It could be the same type of budgetary numbers, but until we see that.
Okay, great. And then the other question on the budget was the reduction of the swept overall. And I think I missed last meeting and you folks talked about that, what that impact might be to folks that have the excess swept. And I think the kind of general reaction is, well, your local education, if you wanted to level fund what you had before, your local education might go up to supplement the excess swept going down.
Mhm.
And I'm sorry, I missed that part of that discussion last week, but is there any way that DRA has weighed in on that and kind of run numbers for what that impact might be on cities and towns?
To answer your question, they may have weighed in on that before the House Ways and Means Committee, but they mostly deal with the revenues. I have not heard anything on that there. They've weighed in other matters. What I do know in House Bill 2, there is language that if a community has a shortfall, then the Department of Education has to, cover that gap per se.
But
Um,
have they, Kathy, identified the source of covering that gap? So is it from departmental operations in the state budget being reduced, or where do they get the money?
I don't want to misspeak. I need to relook at that again. There was a section in the House Bill 2 that it was budgeted, but I don't want to misquote on where that had come from.
Right, I think the last time we talked about it, it was going to, it wasn't for sure because nobody was really talking about it yet, but it seems to me that I read somewhere that it was going to come from state operations.
Could very well be.
I think our last
Check my
discussion
notes on that.
was a third from the school funding trust fund surpluses and then 2/3 from operations.
Right,
They haven't identified any operational cuts to make that difference. So
right.
to me, it's still up in the air.
I think you're right, Paul, and I think there's still a chance that they could start to look at swept again to make it up, because I don't know that they're gonna have, from everything I'm hearing about state operation budget, it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of room for them to cut to make up $20-30 million more.
Well, I think excess swept is just so tempting for them.
It is.
It's just sitting there waiting for them to use it. And we have to make it sure that they understand that we don't feel that they should use it.
Right. Absolutely, Joy.
Well, we have to put there's a political cost for using it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, so anything else, Kathy or Jim? Oh, Jane, go ahead.
Yeah. Did we get sent the recordings of these meetings? Because I would post them to our city website if they were sent.
We have not, but I'd be happy to have them all sent over to you today.
Okay, and I'll send you the MOU with that front page, language we discussed earlier. And Paul, the most recent budget, was that the end of March that has the list of the updated towns?
Sounds right, although then there was the, who was it? The latecomer.
New Durham was out, I think. We thought it
Right.
was in and then it was out. Sandwich is an associate member.
Yeah, so I have 25 communities plus Center Harbor and Sandwich as associate. So it's a total of 27 participants, 25 regular and 2 associate.
Great.
So we have
open the spreadsheet and
27.
double check that.
I'm
We
sorry.
have
Go ahead.
27 towns that have formed the coalition, but we are concerned about all of the towns because that whether they are donor or recipient towns, we are concerned about them. And there are a lot more towns that are going to be impacted by this. And sometimes they just aren't aware of it or they don't have the wherewithal to track it.
Right.
I'll send you that list, Jim. I've got it now. Thanks for
Okay.
clarifying, Mark.
And just another thought to share, as I listened to you, Joy, a moment ago. Mark, I know you've done some follow-up outreach to towns that are not signed up yet as formal members of the coalition, I wonder how and whether you would share this letter with other non-member communities who may be impacted, just to kind of show them that, things are moving forward and, we've got liftoff. And that they'll see the letter and understand that, they could be implicated here as well. So I don't know how you feel about doing that, but that may be a good tool to use as, another touch with some of those communities that may be interested here down the road.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, I found out it's Springfield. That was the latecomer.
And they have joined?
That was my
Yes.
next question.
Well, I need to find out well, Jane, you haven't seen or heard of any of them turning back in their paperwork, right?
Correct. I don't have an authorization signed by them, so that one's still a question mark.
I have the contact information. I will reach back out to them and try to find out if they are going to join. But that's why we had the difference between you and myself, I think, Jane, between 25 and 26. Because I do not have them on my active list. And that's why I have 25.
So you have 25 plus 2 associates.
Plus 2. Yeah.
Perfect. Now I'm corrected. So
Yeah.
I was like,
It's 26 with Springfield, 25 without them.
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Speaking of that, not to roll back the agenda and everything, one item on the budget, has the invoicing at least been done?
Before you came on, I have not been able to touch base with Judy yet. I will get that squared away this week.
Okay.
So, Jim, I think we're safe to say 27 member communities at this point.
Okay.
That is our number. And then if we add Springfield later, we'll add them in.
Very good. Okay.
And I don't know where the city of Portsmouth is as far as their audits and, other financial tasks. But they must be getting a budget ready as well.
yes, it's been a busy season for our finance department as well.
I'll
So
touch base with Judy and we'll try to get that billing out as quickly as we can. Any other business that we need to talk about here? Bumping up against our hour goal. All right, well, we have everything that we need to do, Jim, right?
Yes, sir. We do.
All right. We'll get that first communication out and let's see what happens.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, very good. Thank you all for your time and.
Thanks, everybody.
Before we go, did we set or want to set a date for the next meeting? That way it's a little more predictable. I double booked today and that's why I was late. I apologize, but with a little more advance notice, I can avoid that. So if we set a date today for the next one, it would be helpful.
Yeah. Availability wise, how about let's set the date as the 7th. It's 3 weeks. That will, is that enough time, Kathy, do you think to maybe get some additional answers on the budget?
That would be, because basically the Senate's got to have it out. It's got to get to the House by the June 3rd and 4th. So we'll have a better picture of again, tracking all this stuff, the education in that sense. So at that point, the House will have acted and committees of conference will have been formed on. I'm going to I usually don't like to wager when it comes to the legislature, but I'm going to wager that there'll be a committee of conference for both House Bill 1 and House Bill 2. And to go back real quick, I looked at my the notes. So to your question, Mark, as far as where the funding would come from if there's a decrease, in the language is that the governor can draw a warrant and have the dollars come from the Education Trust Fund. But again, we'll see what happens with
Oh,
through the
so they
community
went
conference.
from 1/3 to all of it from the trust fund?
I'm sorry?
They initially, it's like Paul said, I think a portion of it was supposed to come from the trust fund. So now you're saying the entire amount from the
It
trust fund?
actually, it doesn't, the language in House Bill 2 doesn't have a dollar amount, it just says the governor's, it will establish a warrant.
Oh, okay,
So it's kind of broad that way. And again, subject to change, we shall
Right.
see.
okay,
That's probably implicit because there's about 32 million in surplus in the trust fund, so that's a third.
right,
But if they do move to 100%, then just like our previous conversation, they'll have to have excess swept to push the fund up.
that's right. Yeah, okay, so the 7th of June for the joint committee. And then,
Okay.
Targeting 14 or 21 potentially for the full membership, depending on legislation and how it's panning out. We can give everybody an update, all right?
Okay.
All right,
That's good.
Thank you.
see everyone on the 7th then.
Thanks, everybody.
Have
Bye-bye.
a good week, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.